Mark, Linda, and their 3 children looked like any other family driving home that quiet Thursday night, until the moment flashing lights appeared behind them and something inside their SUV snapped, unleashing one of the strangest and most terrifying roadside breakdowns police had ever witnessed. It was an ordinary Thursday evening, and the sky had already turned a deep shade of purple as night crept over the highway. The traffic was light, the kind of sparse movement that made a police officer's night seem calm, almost too calm. From the shadows behind a row of trees, a police cruiser's lights suddenly flickered on, casting red and blue streaks across the asphalt. The SUV ahead didn't hesitate. It slowed, then gradually pulled to the side of the road. The officer had expected a routine violation, a taillight out, maybe a little speeding. What he didn't expect was the scene that greeted him when he got closer. Inside the vehicle, 5 people sat rigidly, each one seemingly locked in their own bubble of tension. The driver, a man who appeared to be in his 40s, gripped the steering wheel tightly. His wife sat beside him, hands folded neatly on her lap, with a calmness that was almost unsettling. In the back seat were 3 children. The eldest, a boy of around 16, stared blankly out the window, while the middle child fidgeted nervously, tapping a foot against the floor. The youngest seemed frozen, wide-eyed, and staring straight ahead without moving. The officer had seen many traffic stops, but there was something about this family that set off an instinct deep in his gut. As he approached the SUV, the officer noticed the subtle signs of tension that most people would have overlooked. The driver's knuckles were white, the mother's breathing was shallow, and the children's eyes kept darting toward one another as if they were silently communicating some hidden plan. It wasn't the usual nervousness people showed when they had violated traffic laws. This was something different, something darker. The officer's hand hovered near his radio as he prepared to speak, ready for the possibility that this stop might escalate beyond a simple warning. There was also a strange odor wafting from the SUV, a chemical tang that made the officer wrinkle his nose. It was faint, but unmistakable, a hint that something illicit might be inside the car. He couldn't place it exactly, but it set off another warning bell. Still, he kept his composure and asked for the driver's license and registration. The driver handed them over quickly, but there was a stiffness in his movements, as if every action had been carefully rehearsed. The officer's eyes scanned the interior of the SUV more closely. The bags in the back were nondescript, but their placement and the way the family subtly shifted to shield them immediately drew suspicion. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a feeling that at any moment the calm could shatter into chaos. And then he saw it. The slight movement of the driver's hand toward the glove compartment, a motion too quick to be casual. Something was being hidden, something he couldn't see yet, and the sudden alertness in the entire family's demeanor confirmed it. In that instant, what had begun as a routine traffic stop became something entirely unpredictable. The officer realized that this family was capable of actions far beyond what a normal violation might provoke. Every small movement, every glance, hinted at tension tightly coiled like a spring ready to snap. There was no telling what would happen next, and yet, despite the unease gnawing at the officer, he knew he had to proceed carefully. The ordinary night had transformed into a stage where unseen dangers lurked behind polite smiles and quiet composure, and the officer was the first to step into the shadows of a situation that would soon spiral far beyond anything he had ever experienced. The officer stood at the side of the SUV, keeping his gaze steady as he watched the family inside. The tension was thick enough to taste, a silent force pressing against him from all sides. The youngest child continued staring at the floor, her small fingers curled around the edge of the seat as though it were a lifeline. The teenager in the middle shifted constantly, hands fumbling with the seatbelt, trying to occupy himself with any movement that might distract from the growing panic that radiated from the vehicle. The mother, meanwhile, maintained a calm exterior, her back straight and her eyes forward, but the subtle tightening of her jaw betrayed an intensity that was almost frightening. The officer's instincts screamed that this family was hiding far more than a simple traffic violation. As he reached for his radio to request backup, the chemical odor became stronger. It was faint but unmistakable, a bitter, sharp scent that seemed to cling to the upholstery and the family's clothing. The officer's senses sharpened, noting every detail. The way the father's hand hovered near the glove compartment, the mother's calculated stillness, the children's synchronized shifts in position. Nothing about the family was natural. Each movement was deliberate, rehearsed, designed to mask whatever lay hidden beneath the surface. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment for a long time, as though the encounter had been anticipated and planned. The officer's attention turned to the vehicle itself. The SUV was clean, orderly, almost too perfect for a family of 5. There were no crumbs, no stray items, nothing to suggest the presence of a normal household in the back seat. Yet, the bags in the trunk and floor compartments seemed out of place, awkwardly positioned as if they had been stuffed to conceal something important. The officer noted the tension in the father's arms as he gripped the wheel, ready to defend the vehicle or conceal its contents at the first sign of scrutiny. Something about the way the children reacted heightened the officer's unease. Their movements were small but synchronized, almost like a coded signal. The youngest child, who had not spoken a word, suddenly shifted her gaze toward the officer with wide, unblinking eyes, as if measuring him, testing his response. The middle child tapped a foot rapidly against the floor, while the eldest stared blankly, emotionless, but with an intensity that suggested a hidden awareness far beyond his years. The officer realized he was not just observing a family in distress. He was witnessing a unit trained to react as one, capable of coordinated responses that were frighteningly precise. The subtle signs of abnormality only grew when the father reached again toward the glove compartment, this time with more urgency. The officer instinctively stepped closer, ready to intervene, but paused when the mother's hand moved slightly toward the bags on the seat beside her. Every detail screamed that something illegal, something dangerous, was concealed within the SUV. His training told him to expect the unexpected, but even so, the tension in the vehicle was unlike anything he had ever encountered during a routine stop. It became clear that this traffic stop would not remain routine for long. The family's stillness, their rehearsed gestures, and the small but persistent chemical odor indicated a hidden world beneath the surface. Every instinct told the officer that whatever lay within the SUV would challenge everything he had learned about criminal behavior. As the minutes stretched and the shadows deepened around the vehicle, he realized the situation was evolving into something far more dangerous than a simple violation. The quiet tension was building toward a breaking point, and the first true signs of chaos were just beginning to emerge. The moment the officer stepped back to call for assistance, the calm within the SUV shattered. The father suddenly slammed his hand against the steering wheel, startling everyone, including the officer. The sound echoed through the empty stretch of road, followed by the sharp cry of the youngest child. What had been a silent, controlled scene erupted into complete disorder within seconds. The mother lunged toward the back seat, grabbing one of the bags that had been resting beside her. The teenager threw open his door without warning, and the middle child began thrashing violently, kicking at the back of the front seat. The officer shouted commands into the radio, but the chaos inside the SUV drowned out every sound. The vehicle's doors flew open one after another. The father stumbled out, waving his arms wildly, shouting incoherently into the darkness. The officer, unsure whether he was armed, drew his weapon but hesitated to approach. The mother stepped out next, clutching the bag tightly against her chest, as if protecting something valuable or dangerous inside. The children followed, their behavior more erratic with every second. The eldest ran in circles around the SUV, muttering under his breath, while the youngest began to scream uncontrollably, her cries high and piercing, echoing across the empty road. The officer's training told him this was no ordinary panic. This was calculated confusion. Every movement seemed designed to disorient him. From the distance, a passing driver slowed to watch, unable to understand what was unfolding. To an outsider, it might have looked like a family breakdown, an emotional outburst on the roadside. But to the officer, every detail pointed to something more sinister. The mother's focus never wavered from the bag in her arms. The father kept glancing toward the trunk, as if guarding it, while the children's frantic movements pulled attention in every direction. It was chaos with purpose. The officer realized that the confusion was intentional, a tactic to prevent him from noticing what was really happening behind the vehicle. When backup finally arrived, the flashing lights illuminated the scene in red and blue flashes that cut through the night. The family's erratic behavior only intensified under the harsh glow. The father dropped to his knees, clutching his head, rocking back and forth, while the mother crouched beside the SUV, whispering something too low to hear. The eldest child tried to run, darting into the nearby field before being stopped by another officer. The middle child had collapsed on the ground, sobbing and trembling. The youngest had gone silent, standing motionless near the front bumper, her small hands covering her face. Officers moved in cautiously, forming a perimeter around the SUV. The lead officer ordered the mother to place the bag on the ground, but she hesitated, clutching it tighter. One of the officers advanced, and in a sudden burst of movement, the mother hurled the bag several feet away. It hit the pavement with a heavy thud, splitting open slightly. A pale powder spilled out, glinting faintly in the patrol car's headlights. The realization spread instantly among the officers. This wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a drug transport gone wrong. The father screamed something unintelligible as the officers restrained him. The mother was pulled to her feet and handcuffed as she continued to tremble, her calm demeanor replaced by quiet despair. The children were separated from their parents, their earlier frenzy fading into stunned silence. The road that had been quiet minutes before was now filled with the sounds of sirens, shouting, and the rustle of evidence bags. The officer who had initiated the stop stood still for a moment, staring at the broken family, trying to process how quickly the night had turned from routine to chaos. The madness had unfolded too fast to stop, leaving behind a scene of confusion, fear, and the faint, bitter scent of chemicals drifting through the cold night air. By the time the road had been cleared and the family secured, the quiet stretch of highway was transformed into a full-scale investigation site. Flashing lights reflected off the pavement, casting distorted patterns across the empty fields. Officers moved methodically around the SUV, documenting every detail, collecting evidence, and photographing the strange scene that had unfolded. The family sat separated at the edge of the road, guarded by officers who kept their distance. The father stared blankly into space, his face pale and expressionless. The mother sat with her head lowered, whispering to herself in a steady rhythm that never broke. The children huddled together, their earlier wildness replaced by exhaustion and silence. The first step was to secure the SUV and search it thoroughly. Every door, compartment, and crevice was examined. The spilled contents of the bag were carefully collected, revealing not just powder but small packets wrapped in plastic. Inside the vehicle, officers uncovered another layer of deception. The backseat floor was not what it seemed. A hollow section beneath the carpet led to a false compartment that extended beneath the trunk. Inside were bundles of cash wrapped with elastic bands, rolls of fake identification cards, and several small firearms with serial numbers removed. The discovery confirmed the suspicion that this was more than a random drug bust. Investigators began piecing together the fragments of evidence. The IDs displayed different names but identical faces. The father's face, replicated dozens of times. Each document carried a different address across multiple states. The cash totaled thousands, most of it in small bills. The weapons, though hidden, were clean and carefully maintained. It was clear the family had been on the move for a long time, possibly crossing state lines under false identities. The SUV itself had been registered under a name that didn't match any of the identification found inside. As the forensic team continued, another disturbing detail emerged. Hidden behind a panel in the rear door were vials containing a clear liquid, sealed tightly and labeled with numbers that didn't correspond to any known manufacturer. The chemical odor that had lingered during the stop was traced to this hidden stash. It wasn't a simple drug. It appeared to be a mixture used in processing something much larger and more dangerous. The full nature of the substance remained unclear, but its presence hinted at involvement in a criminal network far beyond the capacity of one family acting alone. Detectives at the scene tried to make sense of how the children fit into the operation. Their behavior during the stop now seemed deliberate. The chaos they created had provided enough distraction to buy their parents precious seconds, time that could have been used to conceal or destroy evidence. Witness accounts from drivers who had slowed down earlier confirmed that the children's panic seemed rehearsed, almost like a routine. Every scream, every erratic motion had been part of a strategy designed to confuse and delay police response. When the results of the initial background check came in, they revealed another surprise. The family had no criminal record under their real names. They had been living quietly in a small suburban neighborhood for years. Neighbors described them as ordinary, polite, and private. Nothing about their public lives matched the secret world hidden within their SUV. The father had worked at a repair shop, the mother volunteered at a local shelter, and the children attended school like any others. Yet here they were, surrounded by evidence that suggested years of criminal activity, deception, and meticulous planning. As dawn began to break, the investigation expanded beyond the roadside. Calls were made to federal authorities, and the scene was sealed off completely. The family was taken into separate vehicles, each member escorted by armed officers. The SUV was towed away under heavy guard, its secrets only beginning to be uncovered. The once quiet road now stood as the starting point of a case that would soon unravel into a story of hidden lives, secret operations, and a family bound together by something far darker than loyalty. The days following the traffic stop brought a flood of confusion and disbelief. News spread quickly through the small community where the family had lived. Neighbors who had once shared friendly smiles and exchanged small talk at grocery stores watched in shock as their quiet street became the center of a growing investigation. Reporters gathered near the family's home, their cameras capturing every detail of the police search that followed. What investigators uncovered inside the house only deepened the mystery surrounding the family's true identity and motives. The home was neat and orderly, every item placed with precision. But beneath the surface of normality, hidden compartments were found in walls and floorboards. Inside them were boxes filled with documents, flash drives, and photographs that connected the family to locations across several states. There were maps with routes marked in red ink, receipts from gas stations hundreds of miles apart, and more of the strange plastic packets similar to those found in the SUV. It became clear that their criminal activity had been extensive and methodically planned. Nothing had been done carelessly. Every move seemed to have been part of a long-term operation that extended far beyond what local authorities had expected. Investigators worked to trace the origins of the substances and forged documents. Slowly, a picture began to form of a network specializing in identity theft, illegal trade, and chemical distribution. Yet what puzzled them most was the family's organization. There was no evidence of outside leadership or instructions. It seemed that the parents had built the entire operation themselves, teaching their children to participate in various roles. The eldest had been responsible for destroying evidence during travel, the middle child for managing the hidden compartments, and the youngest for distraction when tension rose. Each one had a purpose, suggesting a system developed through years of deliberate practice. Psychologists brought in to assess the children's behavior noted signs of conditioning, a routine of obedience and secrecy. They appeared more afraid of failing their parents than of facing arrest. Despite their young ages, they understood the importance of silence. When questioned separately, each child repeated the same phrase: "We were helping our family." It became clear that loyalty had been carefully crafted through fear and routine. Authorities struggled to comprehend how a seemingly ordinary household had managed to maintain such a dangerous double life while appearing completely normal to everyone around them. The father remained uncooperative during interrogation, refusing to explain the purpose of the chemicals or the intended destination of the money and weapons. The mother, who at first appeared fragile and broken, became more detached as the days passed, often sitting in silence, her eyes distant and cold. There were no records of accomplices, no traceable digital communications, and no fingerprints that led to anyone outside the family. The network they had built appeared to vanish with their arrest, as if it had been designed to collapse the moment they were caught. When the case reached federal investigators, they concluded that the family had been preparing to disappear completely. The forged IDs and large amounts of cash suggested that the traffic stop had interrupted their final move. Whether they were escaping from someone or hiding from exposure remained unknown. Despite months of investigation, no higher organization was ever identified and no clear motive was established. The family's silence held firm, even as trials began. In the end, the incident was remembered less for the evidence uncovered and more for the haunting image of a family unraveling on the side of a quiet highway. To the officers who had witnessed it, the event became a chilling reminder of how deception can exist within the most ordinary appearances. The house was eventually sealed, the SUV impounded, and the family's name faded from public memory. Yet, for those who had seen the chaos unfold that night, the memory of the flashing lights, the screams, and the strange calm that followed would never disappear completely.